Father, let us seek to glorify thy high and holy name by the lives that we live. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. All right. Did it sound like it got real louder right in the middle of that prayer? Sure did to me. All right, I wanted us to go there and see how to make a happy middle maybe there. But of course we talked about from verse number 11 here in chapter 9. I returned and I saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither the bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all. Now, what is said is pretty obvious in the first part of that, but there is some need to clarify what is said at the end of that particular verse. It's not that God is in control of seeing to it that all these things and all these moves happen just according to his will. No, that's not the case. He's saying, in essence, when he uses the word chance, it's not like gambling. It's not determinism either. And it's not Calvinism. In other places in the Old Testament, the exact same word, instead of being translated as chance, is simply translated as occurrence or happening or something that happened. In other words, the circumstances in life affect all people in different ways. Catching you by surprise, slapping you up back the side of your head, knocking you down. Points of happiness that bring you to shout with happiness. All that's the point that's being made here. And just as it is the case that just because a person has the fastest time in the 100-meter dash and is supposed to win the 100-meter dash in the Olympics doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen. That's not always the way it happens. Just because you're in a position like that doesn't mean that you're going to win. And of course, there's been a number of races down through the years where, here's a fellow who wins. He was supposed to win. And then lo and behold, they found out that he was doping up. He was drugging himself. He was on some type of human growth hormone. And so all of a sudden, this record is no more. He's taken out of the way, and the second place guy is now the gold medal winner. I remember watching throughout my short life of individuals who in long distance running were supposed to win, and then it seemed as though that somebody that didn't have a chance at all to win ends up tripping the person that's supposed to win from the United States, and then some foreigner ends up winning when we all know that the other girl would have won if she hadn't have been interfered with. So that happens. You can't always put your confidence even in physical capabilities like that, because you don't know the unseen circumstances that might come. You're all set up to win the Olympic gold medal, and then all of a sudden there's something called COVID that comes along, purposely trying to kill half the population of the world. And so, whoops, can't do it. I got to quarantine for the next 14 years. I got to take 17 shots and all that. So all these things happen. You can't foresee it happening. You wouldn't have ever imagined it would happen, but it happens nonetheless. And everybody fits into that category too. Even those of us who are not that diligently trying to run faster or anything like that, there's still unforeseen things that impede our progress in whatever we're trying to do. If groceries don't keep going higher, I'm going to have to quit making so much bread, because already my oil that I use is double what it was 3 years ago. That just ain't right. And the bread, it's even more than that. I mean, the bread flour is even more than that, sadly. So just because we want something to happen, we don't have control of what comes our way. We simply don't do it. Now, we can make decisions that will help us to avoid certain things, but just because we make decisions that we think will help us to avoid certain things doesn't mean that we will always be able to avoid certain things, The person that hides in his house and this zero-sum idea that if we just save one life, it's worth it. Now think about that for a minute. If we're going to place our desire to save one life with the policies that a nation uses, then we better get rid of our cars. And we better not be leaving our houses. Well, now we've got a bigger problem than we did about a while ago. You can fall off of a stool in your house and die. We need to get rid of all stools. Got to. We need to quit putting doors. Have you ever seen somebody mash their fingers in doors? That's wouldn't ever happen, wasn't a door. So at some point in time, there has to be a little bit of reason that figures in there. Maybe we're not working at a zero-sum game. Maybe we should be free to make choices that might end up being detrimental to us, not because we put ourselves in a position where we're guilty of something, but the freedom of somebody else crosses with our freedom, and we end up getting hurt. But that's the way it is in the world. It's the way it's been from the very beginning. And for us to think that we need to fix it where it's not like that now is just absolutely ludicrous. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's contrary to reality. It's in opposition to the truth. In other words, there ain't no way it can ever happen, to put it nicely. But all this is built into the observations that Solomon is making here as he views life under the sun, way things are under the sun. Notice another one of the points he makes: the battle's not always to the great warrior. Now let me ask this: do you think that as far as soldiers are concerned, while David killed Goliath, for sure, wasn't Goliath in reality a better soldier than David? Now for that occurrence, of course, it didn't take but one little smooth pebble to take down old Goliath. But if you had a whole outfit of Davids without God's assistance, then you're going to get run over. You need some Goliaths out there taking the charge and standing head and shoulders above the rest of the people. And it's the case as well, neither is the bread to the wise. If bread or food was the direct result of people being wise, there never would be any such thing as a wise man that goes hungry. Well, we know better than that. They do. Now, we need to take our view off of the United States of America, maybe, and think about around the world. But just because a person is wise, that doesn't put food on his table just because he's wise. And wealth to the understanding person or the discerning person, just because a person is perceptive, that doesn't guarantee that he's going to be rich just because of that. Because circumstances arise that you could not foresee. Some things that you thought you would foresee were bigger than you thought they would be. And so there's all types of things that can happen. Nor favor to men of skill or of ability. You know, if a person has the greatest ability in the world, does that mean of necessity that everyone that's around them favors them? Have you ever seen a situation or heard of a situation in which a person on the job is the very best employee that employer has, and yet they're not appreciated by the boss, maybe even made fun of? Has there ever been a husband that fit in that category too, that was disrespected and couldn't find favor in his wife, or vice versa? Well, sure. Well, what about a government? Can a government look down their nose at someone who in actuality is the very type of citizen that all should be? Well, it can happen, doesn't it? So just because a person has these things going for them, we'd say, a leg up on things, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to transpire that way. Because time, occurrence, happenings, they do face us, and we have to be aware of that being the case. All right. Number next, we're going to be reading verse 13 through 18 in this 9th chapter. Somebody that's there would, if you'd like to read that, we'd appreciate it, and read up loud enough where all we can hear. All right, This wisdom have I seen also under the sun, and it seemed great unto me. There was a little city, and few men within it. And there came a great king against it, and he besieged it, and he built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered that same poor man. Then said I, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. The words of wise men are heard and quiet more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. Wisdom is better than the weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. Now, while those are interrelated and some are dependent upon each other, some of them just stand on their own without the associated context as being accurate assessments for sure. But what is pictured here? The first question, what did the author see here in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 13, 15? What was his observation? A city faced what?
A really powerful soldier, a captain.
So here was a city that was being besieged or attacked by a foreign enemy, okay? And the terminology that's used here to describe the implements of war that were used, one of the things that he mentions here is bulwarks. Bulwarks. Now, I've seen movies down through the years, and you probably have too, in which they attempted to create what was this particular thing that is identified as a bulwark here. It was actually like a little movable staircase inside four walls where a person could go up, and then you could push that up there next to the walls of a city, and your men could get in there. Of course, the first few is going to have it hard, you know. They're going to be pouring hot oil on top of them, everything, you know. But these were the means whereby they would try to take a walled city. You have these different ways of trying to get in the city, and all the different implements of war that was possible back during that period of time. And so here's this guy coming, and he has all these means whereby he's going to wipe this city out. And there's not a whole lot of men here. There's just few men. And of all things, the fellow that saves the day is what? Has he identified two ways? He's poor and wise. That don't go together. Well, you talk about a comic book that Solomon's writing here. You know better than that. There's no such thing as a poor person that's wise. Well, it just so happened if it hadn't been for this poor wise person, this city would have been destroyed. Because it was the exploits of this wise man who happened to be poor that saved the city. Now here's the thing. If there had been some giant soldier that marched, maybe he climbed over the walls of around this city. He was so big, and he went out there and whooped all of them. Well, his name would be recorded in history, and we'd all know his name today, if it actually occurred, you know. Or even if it was a part of a storybook or a fable that was written at some point in time. This giant guy, one guy, goes out and protects this whole city by himself. I mean, that sounds like a movie I could watch, don't you? It probably describes the movies that have been made. And everybody knows his name. But then, and he gets key to the city. He may even get all these families that are saved, their lives are saved. They may insist that he take their daughters as wife because they've survived. Okay. But then at the same time, that didn't happen. But what happened here is here's this poor wise man who doesn't even pull a sword out or doesn't shout, "Get away from here, or I'm going to kill all y'all that's trying to get into the city." And yet the city is salvaged because of his wisdom. And then the sad thing that Solomon mentions here is that it don't take long at all, and people don't even remember his name. Well, that ain't right. Well, of course it's not right. And that's why Solomon is bringing our attention to it. Because here's a fellow who saved lives, He was a peacemaker. He was a diplomat and was able to talk his way through saving this city they lived in from being destroyed by this overpowering enemy. And people don't even know who he is. It's as if he didn't even live. Now that's sad. But that does, you'll have to admit, that does describe what goes on in the world oftentimes, isn't it? We know the great generals and the battles and how they were fought and how many enemies were killed and how many of our respective forces were killed, and we know all that. But the persons whose discussions over the table kept war from happening, we don't even know who they are. Don't have a clue. Don't know what decisions were made, none of that stuff. But we're all up in the air and excited about the general who is killing people. And I'm not saying that obviously there's not a time in which we are obviously allowed to defend ourselves and defend our nation. But the point that Solomon is making here is one that we all know well too, and that is oftentimes the people who get the most headlines and stuff shouldn't be getting that much headlines, especially in light of the fact that there are other people who are doing a whole lot more good and keeping a whole lot less bloodshed happening, but we don't know who they are. And that's not good, for sure. All right, so of course I guess it would lead out of that question number 16, why is wisdom better than strength? Going to save the city here. And just think of all the situations in life where thinking about things, taking into consideration the evidence that's available, instead of thriving on emotion and emotion alone and responding in kind to something we think has happened, just think if a little bit of time, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of examining the evidence that's available would lead to a conclusion that might, in fact, not end up in war, bloodshed. I mean, that would seem to make sense. And if it seems as though we're lacking in that ability in this country today, then it's because you've got your eyes open. Because that's the type of leadership we got. It's easier, since you're not going to be fighting no wars, it's easier to make friends with people around the world, whether you need to be doing it or not, to test out your weapons and keep money in your friends' pockets at the stake of young men's lives. And as well, how well the country's thought of around the world for being like that. All right, number 3. Why do you think it would be the case, and here of course it is, according to this fictitious idea that Solomon is proposing here, because obviously while he may not have a specific instance in mind in which this happened, although he may, then obviously we know what happens all the time. Why would a person be in a position that they would despise the wisdom of a poor man?
Because of station in life.
Yeah, because of who he is. He's not supposed to be wise. If he's wise, and of course again you have to, here's one of those, a couple of terms that are very subjective, and that is he's poor. Well, what does poor mean here? In comparison to who? Is this poor man a person that doesn't have anything, or he has the necessities of life, but he doesn't have any more than that? And so he's poor in comparison to, say, the soldiers in this city that could go and fight? Well, maybe so. Yeah. But because of his position in life, then he's in fact looked down upon. He can't say anything right, you know. Instead of, we find ourselves in a position like this a lot of times when somebody makes a statement that's true, then that doesn't mean that we agree with everything they say. But if they say there's something that is accurate and true, then we agree with them on that, for sure. And we don't have to agree with everything they say to agree in that point, obviously. It doesn't matter where he is, what caste in society he finds himself in. You know, that's one of the things in India that I've just read about, and how you got this caste system where if you're in a particular caste, then it's impossible for you to even be in the same room with someone that's in a higher caste. And of course, when the gospel goes into a situation like that, it messes it all up. When genuine Christianity is practiced, you know. If the caste system still is intact, then Christianity ain't been practiced. You know? But when Christianity's been practiced, there is no such thing as different levels of brethren. No caste systems for sure.
Freddie, it's always the guy in charge that's recognized and remembered for things like that. You know, with that Columbus discovered America, he probably wasn't reading this stuff. Someone else did that, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Like in the Battle of the Bulge, I thought about that. You know, the Germans and the people, Americans surrounded, don't surrender or die.
Yeah.
The German called, you offered a reply, but no, I bet he did far shot.
No, that's right. Exactly.
I remember who he was.
Oh, absolutely. He said, y'all give up. Nope. Not going to. You know. And of course, he didn't, but it was the guys around him that were being picked off one by one, for sure. But what were their names? Well, that's not found in the history books much. All right. So here in this whole little section, concluding this chapter here, a point is being made relative to just the observations you make in life and the illustrations that are there to show the futility of life separated from a knowledge and appreciation and obedience to God. And that's what Solomon's doing. He says, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. This is not what I want it to be. I don't like it. It's not fair. Pooey on it, you know. Well, that's the way he thinks. And that's the way anybody would think in observing such things as this and not having a clear view of there being more than just this world in which we live now. This is what happens under the sun. There is a payday one day, and all these things will pale in comparison to the justice that is meted out on that day for sure. All right. Chapter 10 at verse 1, let's read I want us to read the whole 15 verses, but let's at least read a little bit of that. And of course, nobody gets sick. Read the first 6 verses, somebody.
Then flies caused the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. Yea, also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him, and he saith to everyone that he is a fool. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifies great offenders. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in a low place.
All right.
How many verses?
Yeah, verse 7.
I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants upon the earth.
All right, now those last 2 verses are observations that he's making in which things are not as you would expect them to be. People in powerful positions are in lowly positions. People that are supposed to be in lowly positions are in powerful positions. How did that happen? Well, it does from time to time. There are all types of examples down through history in which things have been reversed as what we would normally expect them to be, because that's just what happens. That's a part of being human, and things don't always turn out just exactly like we think that they should reasonably turn out. And of course, that means that mankind is not all the time reasonable, nor does he exercise common sense. And he'll oftentimes believe and do that for which there is no evidence whatsoever to believe and do it. But he's free to do that. But he'll have to pay one day. So his first question here in verse number 1, what does a little folly do to one who is respected for his wisdom? Literally does what? Makes it stink.
Something that smells bad.
All right. So here you have something that could be highly beneficial, something that smells good, and then lo and behold, you get some foreign substance in it and begins to decay, and the smell, it's not too good. And if it's medicine, if it's something that you would use to treat some type of illness, then it might make you sicker than what you already were. For the reason you're taking this medicine, it might kill you even. And of course, his illustration is not about keeping the lid on your jars or anything like that. It's that it doesn't take a whole lot to mess up the influence and the ideas that people have about other individuals. How many mistakes do people have to be aware of before their reputation is ruined? Sometimes it don't take much at all, you know. And sometimes just the accusation, whether it's true or not, has the tendency to bring down individuals who are in powerful positions. And sadly, that's the way it's always been and always will be here on this earth under the sun, where things like that happen. But here, it's talking about a genuine situation in which one mistake causes wisdom seemingly to disappear. Did the one mistake actually so deprive that individual of his wisdom that he's irretrievably lost? Well, no, that's not the idea. Would he maybe lose his ability to have everybody think that he's telling the truth all the time now? Would he have to reclaim to a degree the trust of the people that he's let down by making this human sin guilty of this problem that has happened? Well, of course, that could mess it up for sure. And of course, when a person that we consider to be foolish to begin with makes a foolish mistake, it doesn't bother us because we know that's who they are. But we have the tendency to elevate some people to a level where they couldn't ever make any mistake, or else they would lose their reputation and their character would be tarnished from then on. And of course, you know, all we have to ask is how many of the great heroes of the Bible could pass that test? Nary one except Jesus. That's it. He's the only one, you know. I mean, here you got the father of the faithful who's lying about Sarah being his wife so he won't get killed by the king. Oh, I ain't going to pay attention to Abraham no more. See, even the thoughts, those ideas on the earth, I realize there's some situations, if you are aware, say, of your banker embezzling from your bank account, then it would be totally fine for you to not have anything else to do with that banker nor that bank account. For sure. No doubt about that. What if they said, I'm sorry? I don't care what they say. I'm not giving them another chance on that. Same way on a number of different things, because if they're doing that to me, then is there a likelihood they are taking advantage of other people too? Possibly. You know, we've used the example before of the idea of forgiveness and what all is involved in it. And you say you're a business owner and one of your employees is stealing from you. And you confront them with it. And they explain all these reasons why they did it and all these contributing factors to their feeling as though they had to do that just to survive. And they ask for your forgiveness, and they're just all tore up, and so you forgive them. And then a month later, they do it again. Do you have to keep on employing that person? Well, of course not. Because what you can see by way of evidence is that maybe he was just saying he was repenting, and maybe it was just that he got caught, and he's sorry he got caught. Because if you're sorry you got caught, then if you think you won't get caught again, then you'll keep on doing it. But if you're repenting of it, then you're working on that not being something you have to deal with anymore. You're working on it. Maybe not perfectly, but you've made that determination. And it said, well, maybe you'll fire me, but if you fire me, would you write me a letter of recommendation to somebody else? Well, of course not. Absolutely not. I mean, how many times you have to do it? And if that's the case, then what about the wife who catches her husband running around on her? How many times he got to say, oh, I'm so sorry, take me back? How many times you got to do that? Is it a never-ending time? I mean, didn't Jesus tell Peter 70 times 7? Well, ain't no telling how many diseases you can get that many times. No. And that's why the judgment is left up to the individual who's been wronged in both those instances. They have to make a determination as to what the proper course of action is to follow, because it's not just about them. There are other people involved in the situation. The other employees, the family that's living off of the proceeds from the business, the kids in the marital situation, all the other people involved. No. There's a period of time in which you can see through a fake forgiveness. And if a person's not willing to repent, then they don't want to be forgiven. Simple as that. If God won't forgive somebody that won't repent, then how can I? Well, I can't. And nobody else can either. All right.
I think a good statement there. He goes back even further. Chapter 9, verse 18, the last sentence within that. This wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. That one sinner might be able to destroy all the good that was done within that negotiations, within the talking,
Yeah.
et cetera, and it doesn't take more than a fool to be able to destroy all the good things that were done between.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The wisdom here, all the wisdom in the world, cannot prepare for the destructive influence of sin. Just can't do it. I mean, it can neutralize the weapons of war, you know. It can say, we're going to sign a peace treaty right here. Okay. But one sinner can destroy all the good that's been accomplished. And with all the wisdom in the world, it doesn't take a whole lot of people doing the wrong thing to mess up the good that was accomplished by the vast majority. Of course, that's simply a reflection or a statement on history, for sure. And then notice in verse 2, a wise man's heart is his right hand, but a fool's heart is his left hand, which of course proves once and for all that left-handed people are of the devil. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's not. But our left-handed people are foolish. No, that's not what it says either. But usually in the Old Testament, the figure of the right hand is the position of strength. And that's, of course, that's proverbially, obviously. Does that mean there's no such thing as strong left-handed people? That's not what the idea is here. But generally speaking, the right hand is when Jesus sits down on the right hand of the Father in heaven, that's the position of authority and a position of strength. Not throwing off on the left, but that's just a position where the Bible pictures as someone being close to you. They are close to to your right side of your body, which supposedly on that side of your middle of your body, your heart is. I guess. All right, let's see if we can get us another question real quick. Number 2, why does a fool, or how does a fool prove he's a fool? How does that come about? He starts talking, you know. You know, sometimes we think that we can know something about an individual just by looking at them, you know. You can tell. But of course, if they don't have a dunce hat on, you know, and they're not sitting in the corner, then you can't really know if they're the dunce that just got through sitting in the corner all day, being put there by the teacher at school. You can't know that. But one sure way for it to be known is by the fool opening his mouth. And then it becomes pretty obvious. And oftentimes, sadly, it's not obvious to the person that's doing the speaking, but it's obvious to the people that's hearing the speaking being done. And so that reminds us of the wise man Solomon, book of Proverbs, saying, and here's a paraphrase of that, it's better to keep your mouth shut and people wonder if you're a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt, you know. And so many times that, in fact, does happen. So when a person is a foolish person, then they talk like a foolish person, act like a foolish person, and it's the old proverbial, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, then it might be a duck. Same thing holds true for a foolish person. Number 3, what evil did the author see in verses 5 through 7? And this is what I was talking about a while ago, in these opposite positions you'd think people should be. He called it an evil thing that he observed on the earth, that here's a person who has, this is a person that's in a position of authority, a person in a position of a ruler, should be a person who knows what he's saying, should be a person that is dealing with facts. But here in this situation, that's not happening. That's not happening. Now, is this coincidental or this is providential? Well, I'll leave it up to you to figure that out. Then number 6, folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low places. Again, why should folly and foolishness be highly elevated, and at the same time, people who have more are in a lowly position? This ain't supposed to happen either. This is backwards at the way the world should be. People who have good sense ought to be honored, and people who don't have no sense ought not to be honored or put in a position that can cost people their lives. That's the way it should work. You shouldn't make a person the leader when he's not going to lead people in the direction he ought to go and may be detrimental to their very lives. Makes sense, doesn't it? And so when you've got dumb people who are teaching and smart people who are having to listen to dumb people teach, and I'm talking about people that can't talk, I'm not talking about dumb like that, I'm talking about idiots, then that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's backwards. And sadly, that describes much of the world in which we live today. Common sense is not common. When somebody will tell you that you have to accept a fact that a girl can be hid on the inside of the body of a boy, and that we need to help her and affirm her desire to transition, then you know we're in clown world, folks. That's where we're at. That's ridiculous. And then when you have the American Medical Association sticking their 2 cents in it, ask your doctor the next time you go to your doctor, ask them what they think about the so-called biology of sex transformation. Ask them about it. And if it's just a few that are trying to go along to get along, then they need to be exposed instead of the whole blanket American Medical Academy across the country going along with reconstructive surgery, which amounts to castration of boys, and removal of healthy breast on girls. And that's reality? And that's truth? No, it's not. And when people say about stuff like that, well, the statistics are in, the word is done decided. It's not been. It's not been. It better be pretty soon, and it should be outlawed. The very idea, and I mean, there's 2 states right now that have in their possible next assembly, 2 states have, the mother has up to 28 days after birth to decide where she wants to keep the child on. That's killing the child after it's born up to 28 days.
My understanding of what you're saying,
Yeah.
say that again.
That there's 2 bills that are ready to be brought in the next assembly in 2 states, that New York and California, that would give the mama the right to her body, which is now another body that's outside the womb, 28 days to decide whether to keep the child or not, with the wishes of her doctor.
If we can do that, why can't we say, when he's 5-year-old and tired of it?
Exactly.
Where's it stop?
It don't stop. I mean, that's where we're at. That's where we're at. Life is not looked upon as being sacred. Human life is not looked upon as having dignity because it's human life created in the image of God. And when people have been led to believe that they're nothing more than educated apes, then this is what happens.
Somehow we've got, evil. I mean, we're way down the line toward, falling like we're on them.
Oh, absolutely.
This thing is gonna have to be stopped.
It's got to.
Evil's in this world, and we have to completely combat it. We have to speak out against it. We have to do all we can against evil.
Yeah.
And that's an example of the evil
That's it.
going around the world today.
And,
You know, they were down on the soldiers and everything in Vietnam.
yeah,
We didn't go out and put grenades in a child after.
no.
And then when you pick up something, you just lodge a pin, it blows you and the child up too. That's supposed to be a third world country, whatever, you know. We're falling into those shoes.
Exactly. We're
Shame we
just-
left God out of it.
It's the result of a godless society. When you kick God out of everything, then anything goes. And that's where we're at, sadly, presently, in this country. Well, won't stop right there. We've got about 5 extra minutes there. I am sweating profusely. So I'm going to go cool off. And thank y'all. We'll see you here in a few minutes.